Hey, everybody, it's Governor Gavin Newsom. I'm here at the State Operation Center and looking forward to having a conversation with therock, who will come on and join us in just a moment. I just left a press conference where we updated folks on where we are in the state of California in terms of our efforts to bend the curve and meet this moment and address the deep anxiety that I know many of you are feeling about these stay-at-home orders and all of us that are practicing physical distancing, wondering how long this will last and what can we anticipate in the course of the next few weeks with any changes. We're certainly hopeful in the state of California because the efforts of 40 million people that have done a remarkable job practicing physical distancing. And you've seen that demonstrably in the numbers, a significant decline over the course of the last few weeks of people that are out and about, and really it's testament to each and every individual that we're at this point where we're only seeing modest growth in this state. And so with that, I'm just really grateful. Dwayne took the time to be here. Thank you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Governor. Thank you so much for having me on and being so generous with your time, and I appreciate it. But you know, like you and like all of us Californians, all of us Americans, we're doing everything that we possibly can do to get through this thing, manage this thing as best we can, take care of our family, our loved ones, and as you were talking about, you know, not only practice social distancing, but just as important in practicing our social distancing is, I think, recognizing the encouraging numbers that we are finally seeing after all these weeks.
No, I appreciate it. And it, you know, Dwayne, one of the reasons I'm so honored to be able to talk to you is you really led the way in having the guts to make the point that, you know, no one stands taller than when they reach out and ask for help. That the toughest folks out there are people that call someone else and say, you know what, I need to talk to you. I'm not feeling, you know, good about things. I'm stressed out. I'm a little anxious. And I think the biggest and most difficult thing when we talk about people staying at home is to remind them they're not alone. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, I'd love to. That's one of those things where and I know for me personally, as I speak from experience, and I know that a lot of Americans are dealing with the same thing too. It's like it's almost happening in cycles. So the first cycle is just how real the virus is, and we're watching the rest of the world, and we're having the rest of the world inform us. Of course, our local state leaders are informing us too as well. Okay, and then the lockdown starts to happen. The isolation starts to happen. We think we could do it, and then all of a sudden, you could be the most optimistic guy or optimistic woman in the world, and then all of a sudden you start to feel a little bit of this heaviness. And so it happened, to me, and I've had some bouts with depression in the past that I've been open about. And with this particular one was interesting, and we got to recognize it just in the fact that, it is, when we are self-distancing, there's the immediate change and the sudden change that happens. Then there's the deaths that are happening all around us. And it reached a point where somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who has it. Now I have very close friends who have lost their loved ones just like that, and it's really devastating. And then there's the unemployment, then there's the fear of the unknown. So as you know, Governor, and as a lot of people watching right now know that, it's one of those things where sometimes when we get a little down and we get into the muck of things and we're in the sludge of things, and it happens to the best of us, generally we could call our buddies and say, hey, tell me about tomorrow. Tell me how good things are going to be tomorrow. What do you got going on in your side of the world? But we're dealing with a global grief that happens. I think when we're dealing with a global grief, there's a heaviness there in the air, and I think that we recognize that. So what I've been able to do was, because I tell you, Governor, I've had, when the whole thing first started, it's been about 50-50. I've had some really good days where I feel anchored and balanced, and I feel optimistic and hopeful, and I feel like, okay, a lot of people are counting on me, just like you two as well, family, friends, people who we can have some influence over, some positive influence. And then the opposite side of that, I'll have some days where it's just, I'm wobbly, because you just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so what I started to do was reach out to my friends and say, hey, let's have some fireside chats. Let's break open a few drinks. Let's talk about it. So on my good days, I'm reaching out to them. But then on my wobbly days, I get such gratification, great gratitude in that they reach out to me too, because at the end of the day, like you said, Governor, man, we're not alone. Nobody's alone in this thing. So this is the kind of stuff that causes anxiety, it causes depression, it causes insomnia, it
Yeah.
causes a lot of things that we have to be aware of and do everything we possibly can do, in my opinion, to exercise that muscle. And this is the biggest one right here, where we hold on to that fundamental quality of faith that things are going to be okay. Not necessarily a religious faith, but just the faith that things are going to be okay. Because, you know, I have a two-hand philosophy. I believe that we can control things with our own two hands, and that's what we should concern ourselves with. So in this case, we can control our social distancing. And again, we see encouraging numbers, and things will be okay, and you're not alone. And we all are experiencing this thing together.
I love that. And you know, my mantra is this whole idea that the future is not just something to experience, it's something to manifest. It's not in front of you, it's inside of you, right? It's our decisions that will determine our fate and future. And the capacity for all of us, hundreds of millions of Americans, to practice physical distancing will determine the fate of this disease, this epidemic, and will bend that curve and get us to the other side even quicker. So it's so important, people, maintain that faith that we will get through the other side, and that we have the power to actually influence that we're not bystanders at this incredibly important time.
That's right, absolutely. And Governor, I have a question for you. During this time, you know, when you think about and you're talking with your own family, I know you have little kids too as well.
Yeah.
What we're doing on our end is trying to make sure that our babies, I have an 18-year-old daughter, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I have one that's going to be 2 next weekend. Awesome. We're trying to do our best to make sure that they don't feel as much. Our 18-year-old is good. Like she's focused and she's locked down, but our little ones, and much like yours, I'm curious, are you guys making sure that they don't feel any kind of disruption? They're probably seeing a lot more daddy at home, which is a good thing. It's that silver lining. What are you guys doing?
No, it's such an important point, right? The distinction, because our kids can't verbalize like you and I are verbalizing. They can't pick up the phone and call someone. They don't even know how to reach out, or moreover, they don't even know how to express that they're feeling anxious. They express it by not sleeping, they express it by having a tummy ache. And it's so important for us as parents to really be hypersensitive to those changes. And also, by the way, still, I love to hear that your 18-year-old's doing well. But for teens, this is tough, right? I mean, because you're not seeing your friends at school. If you're a senior in high school, you're like, what's happening in my grades? Am I going to get into college? How do I make up for all of this? My SATs and everything else. And so what we're doing as a state, not just as a family, like you're doing as a family, is trying to make sure that we avail ourselves to resources. And we put out with our Surgeon General, California, because we really are a nation state, has our own Surgeon General. And we put out detailed guidelines where people can call for helplines and also call for playbooks so that they can address their own anxieties, but also address the needs of their children. That site's at covid19.ca.gov. One of those terrible government sites, right? covid19.ca.gov. But we make available to everybody and really encourage people to take advantage of those resources.
That's fantastic. And I know about that. Of course, a lot of my buddies there in California, I'm in California too as well, that we're aware of that. And a question for you then, Governor, is there, when we think about the new normal that we're going to have to start thinking about now, I'm sure you guys are doing that in your own household, encouraging your staff to as well and all the people around you. What would you say, what does that new normal look like? What are you seeing on your end that's encouraging too as well?
You know, Dwayne, this is not just complimenting you just to appear to be patronizing, but man, I think the most powerful and potent things are people like yourself that are willing to talk about depression and you know, iconic individuals like yourselves, not just talking about being physically tough, but recognizing that the brain is also part of the body. And that brain health matters as much. And number two, you know, just your one video that 25 million people seeing, just teaching your daughter how to wash their hands. I mean, that's saving lives. And so it's those kinds of things that we all can do our small part. Not everybody's The Rock. Not everyone has a platform that a governor or a mayor may have, but we all have friends. We all have small networks, even if it's just one person following you, to remind them of their power at this moment, to make a difference, to quite literally bend the curve so that we can come out the other side sooner than people ever even imagined.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that we were talking about earlier about, being really aware of the things that we can control. There's a lot of things that we can control, and there's a lot of things that we can't control. The virus, for example, you can't cheat it, but we can do our best to help control it. And one of the things we could do, as simple as it is washing hands, teaching our kids how to wash hands, and being really, really disciplined about that too as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, we've got Easter coming up, and this is a time that's all about family. And I know people have a temptation as the weather starts to get better, a little cabin fever, right? Because then people all across the country, around the world, have been practicing social distancing, physical distancing, and now the sun's out. It's Easter weekend. Kids are there, and what do you recommend we tell our kids, and what do we recommend to others they tell their families in terms of this weekend in particular, and making sure we continue to be safe and be smart?
You know what? This has been a tough month and a half, 2 months for us. It's been a tough 2020. Kind of all around. And, the sun's coming out, and that was the thing too earlier on. It's like, okay, when the sun comes out, it's going to start to flatten the curve of this, because the virus doesn't like sunshine. The summer's coming, the springtime is coming. So it's extremely tempting for us as a family. I mean, we want to get out. The weather's beautiful. Yeah. So I would tell fellow Californians, as well as I would tell our fellow Americans, that I would tell them exactly what I tell myself, and exactly what our family is saying to each other, which is, are we doing everything we possibly can do to be the cure and not the reason why the curve doesn't flatten? And again, it's tempting to get out there. It's Easter weekend. We got a lot to celebrate and a lot to be grateful for. But one of the things that I go back to when it comes to just mental wellness, not only for myself, men, my wife, us, family, we're having the calls, we're having the video calls, is this idea of silver lining. And this idea of trying to find a silver lining in a lot of the things that we have going on. And, if you really stop and pause just for a second, you can find a lot of silver lining. And in that silver lining is, it's a beautiful weekend. It's Easter. We have a lot to be grateful for. We're going to have our Easter egg hunt as we normally do. It's going to be inside the house. It's going to be in the front yard a little bit. It might be in the backyard, but other than that, that's it. Because when you think about it, I'd like to think that when we look back on this, yes, it's unprecedented. Yes, we've never gone through this. And yes, our lives have changed just like that. And there is a time when this was before this crisis, and then life after this crisis. But when we look back at it, these are the moments where, as hard as it is, as difficult as it is, I mean, you mentioned cabin fever. I mean, brother, my wife and I at midnight every night after the kids are asleep, we are just sitting at the kitchen, sitting in the kitchen, going, "Wow, all right, let's just breathe. We got this. We're all in this. We're all experiencing this together, and it's not easy." But again, I would recommend to our fellow Californians and our Americans what I've been telling myself and our family, which is just do everything we can to be part of the cure. Because because if we're disciplined, especially if we're disciplined, if we're exercising discipline now, then we're going to be able to enjoy things much quicker down the line. And that's what I want. I want that for us. I want that for our Americans. I know you do too. I want our kids to get back to school. I want every American to get back to work. I want us to earn that hard-earned dollar that everybody enjoys doing and getting back to work. So we're almost there, but we got to be disciplined, especially now, because this is that time, as you know, and you're feeling it, in California, where it's that you start to see a little bit of the encouraging news. The curve's starting to flatten, especially in New York, where things were tough and still are tough. California, all throughout the country. And then you almost don't want to let up a little bit. Now's the time where you really got to stay in that disciplined lane.
Yeah, no, but you're an athlete, man. We don't run the 90-yard dash, right? I mean, that's the worst decision in the world. So, you talked, and I know our time's limited, but you talked about silver linings, and I think one of the silver linings in your life is still having your mom. And I know it's been a tough year for you with your dad, and I imagine others watching that have lost loved ones. But that precious time with your mother, and the reason I bring it up is to make this point that we're all, Dr. King said, we're all bound together by a web of mutuality, and your mom. Is because you are in that interdependence. And what I mean by that is the impact all of our individual decisions have now on the lives of others. And so we talk about young, healthy people saying, hey, I got this. But young, healthy people have parents as well, and they don't want to have this virus, and we don't want to put their lives at risk. And I'm just curious what your interaction is with your mom, and how you're talking to her, and how you're talking to the rest of the family about how we take care of mom.
Sure. Well, thank you for bringing that up and about my mom. She's going to be thrilled, by the way, that the governor is talking about her. And thank you for bringing that up about my dad. I did. My dad decided to check out, and he walked with the angels just like that back in January. And also what's interesting, before I get to my mom, because I know a lot of people are going through this, is there was a time when this happened, when we started our social distancing and isolation, and everything got very real and very scary the first couple of weeks. And I started to think to myself, I was talking to my therapist, who I keep very busy, by the way. I said, it feels like, did I not grieve enough for my dad? Because I feel, and in our conversations, it was really beautifully articulated. Well, we have a global grief going on. And when there's a global grief like this, everybody's feeling this grief. You're feeling it's kind of heavy. So I bring that up to say, while I don't have my dad anymore, certainly miss him, but I do have my mom. And we all have our loved ones in our life, whether it's our mom, dad, hopefully both, grandparents, aunts, uncles. And, we made a point very early. I said, Mom, she was in Florida. I said, I'm taking you out of Florida, and I'm going to bring you to us. And now you're locked down with us. And so she's high risk, Governor. She was diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer. She has existing issues. And, this virus has one pathology from its inception to the lungs of human beings. And we all know, hopefully, we all know the outcomes that could happen out of that. So she was very high risk. We've locked her down. I think she's very happy to be here with the babies too as well. But what's interesting is I've had to, and I'm sure it's been like this for you. I know it's been like this for a lot of my friends, is this interesting thing happens with our parents and with our elderly in our family. They almost think this thing like they're immune to this. Yeah. And it's like, no, I'm going to go out. And so about 2 weeks ago, she was heading out, and I saw her get in the car, and I ran out there, and I said, I'm sorry, where do you think you're going, Mom? She goes, I'm going to run up to Publix real quick just to grab a few things. I said, no. You're not going to go to Publix. So she's well aware now of the seriousness of this. But, like a lot of Americans out there, we got to take care of our loved ones. And that's another thing, too, that you really smartly brought up is, I think to myself, thank God, I'm a lucky SOB. I'm in some pretty good shape. I'd like to keep active, but I always think, well, what happens if I were to get sick or get somebody sick? If for whatever reason I'm asymptomatic and all of a sudden I bring something home, or I'm not being disciplined in my own social distancing, and I say, you know what, it's okay, I'm just going to go out this one time. Take a picture with somebody, shake somebody's hands, or just in an airborne way, it just hits me, and then all of a sudden I get her sick. That would be a tough one. So again, we got to not only be disciplined with us, but certainly our loved ones too, our elderly.
No, amen. And today, just interestingly, Dwayne, we had a big press conference. We've got this USNS Mercy, that remarkable Navy medical ship, this floating hospital in Los Angeles port, and we had a big spike in the number of our seniors in our skilled nursing facilities, our nursing homes, that have been tested positive. And big deal today, the Navy is now allowing us to move our seniors now on board that Navy hospital ship to protect them. And it reinforces the point you're making. Our seniors are the most vulnerable at this moment. And so your example about getting your mom and saying, what the heck are you thinking of taking the keys, Mom? You remember she used to do that to you a lot when you were younger. Now it's time to do it for our parents. Take those keys away. I love that example, man. And that's good. Hey, just in our brief moment, because just I love you saying you got a therapist, and love you just being so honest and open. What more do you want to communicate to folks that frankly say, well, that's good for him, but I've got this. I'm still tough. I may be drinking a little bit more. I may not be sleeping as much. I may be eating a little bit more, ice cream, and I may not be taking care of myself, but I got this. What do you want to communicate to those folks in terms of what they really should be doing?
Well, you know what? I think, I try not to be as judgy as I used to be, and I try to underreact to a lot of things. But, when I see a lot of people, but I got to say, I feel like my senses and my gut, my instinct, and trying to have a finger on the pulse of what's going on in America with our Americans, it feels like the majority of people they get it. They're doing everything they need to be doing. They're disciplined. Now, there's going to be a few out there who says, I'm okay, I'm tough, I'm this, I'm that, and not getting enough sleep, I'm cool, I beat depression once, I'm going to beat it again. And that may be true, and you may beat this one too. However, I do believe in always practicing, discipline, and especially when it comes to something like this, because the more disciplined we can be now, then the earlier we can get back to enjoying a life that we once did. Now, it will be different, I believe. There's going to be a new normal that we're going to understand, embrace, and achieve. But that's okay. And that's going to be a good thing, because out of this, again, there's going to be some silver linings. And again, I want everybody to get back to work. I want the kids to get back to school. I also believe in, and I know you believe this too as well, that not only are we resilient as Californians and as Americans, we're incredibly resilient. I also want, out of this, I think there's some silver lining in that we're going to have an emotional confidence coming back out of this thing. And it's going to be a different kind of confidence. And I think the kind of confidence we're going to have is one that's more respectful to a virus and to a pandemic like this. Hopefully, God willing, if it does come back, it won't be as strong. We'll be smarter, more informed. But also, I think that confidence is going to allow us to be more empathetic. And I think we're more empathetic, then we just become better. So I do believe our bounce back, not only economy, getting back to jobs and employment, but also I believe we're going to be better for it. And I also believe it's going to be with that kind of, our bounce back is going to have that kind of force and drive, that of a freight train. Now, it might not happen overnight, but it's going to be one of those slow builds. We talked about not running that sprint, but it's going to be a marathon. But I do firmly believe that, and I also believe this, Governor, and I know you feel the same way, is one day we will rise again.
No, I love that, man. I love the whole notion of empathy, seeing the world from a different set of eyes, just softening our edges, our tone, our tenor, the way we talked about others and people we didn't know, strangers, the way we react to each other on social media, and just, taking a pause back and really starting to talk about this fundamental universal notion that there's no leak on your side of our boat, that we rise and fall together. So I appreciate that, Dwayne. And I appreciate you, everything you're doing, your courage, your conviction. And man, I appreciate the frame around discipline as well, and hard work, grit, and resiliency. And so I think so many people are meeting this moment, and I'm really grateful you and I had this moment together as well.
Well, I appreciate you, Governor, and I know I speak for fellow Californians and, America too as well, in that I appreciate your leadership. It takes a special, as you know, and as a lot of leaders out there know, and a lot of people out there know, that it's in time of trial like this and challenge that not the real leaders step up, I think, but the quality leaders step up. And you do it with a little bit of elegance, you do it with a little bit of grace, you also do it with some really great accountability on both coasts. I thought both coasts stood up really strongly in the face of this, from California to New York. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your leadership. I have one question for you that I know the world's going to want to know. I love my cheat meals on the weekends. I got a big one coming up. Talk to me about your cheat meals. What kind of cheat meals are you rocking? What's your favorite?
Brother, I can't. Sushi is not a cheat meal, so I'm over it. All right, that'd be like the healthiest thing I would do for my body, is eat that. But you know what? I'm gonna admit this is it's not now even a cheat meal, because all the drive-throughs started getting closed down, and I still needed my coffee in the morning. I found myself, forgive me, but I'm in the majority here, I think, with those Egg McMuffins at McDonald's. So that's been my cheat meal recently. I'm not sure I could sustain me, but it's been my cheat meal.
Hey, that's all right, brother. That's all right. You go Egg McMuffins, I go tequila, and I'll go pancakes and French toast. I'll do the whole thing.
I like it.
I like it too.
I like the tequila.
We will keep in touch. And again, thank you for your leadership and your time. I appreciate it, Governor.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much, Mike. Take care of yourself, buddy.
All right, brother. You too. Talk soon.